everyone, it is Dani and welcome to this video. Now I trust and hope that you're doing really amazing, and we're going to be talking about the pair of earthquakes that struck just offshore Cuba. Well, I'm recording this video on Sunday the 10th in the evening, so you'd be seeing it on the 11th or thereafter. So there were two earthquakes that struck just offshore Cuba, undoubtedly causing devastation in especially the eastern part of the country, and Cuba has already been dealing with some crises, and this only adds more to what is already there. First things first, my thoughts and my prayers are with the people of Cuba right now. And in terms of the earthquakes, one was a foreshock, one was the main shock, and there have been a lot of aftershocks as well. So let's get straight to the details. The first earthquake struck at around 10:50 Eastern time, just offshore the southeastern coast of Cuba. Now that earthquake was estimated initially to be a 5.4, but then it was adjusted to a magnitude 5.9. So that's a pretty decent shaking right there, just off the coast of Cuba. Now that is where the epicenter of that earthquake was. What's the epicenter if you're not familiar with it? Well, the epicenter is above the point within Earth's surface, which is called the focus or the hypocenter, where the earthquake begins. So the earthquake starts inside of Earth. So that point, let's say the earthquake starts here. Then up here on Earth's surface, that would be the epicenter of the quake. Buildings there, persons there would have felt the strongest of the shaking. Now, the further away we go from the epicenter, the weaker the seismic waves, the weaker the earthquake is felt. So Jamaica, for example, did not feel the full force of any of these earthquakes. So that first earthquake that occurred at 10:50 a.m. Now, following that, at just about an hour later, there was the main shock. So that first earthquake was a foreshock. It precedes the main event, which was that magnitude 6.8. And sometimes we don't know that these are foreshocks until the main shock happened. So that second earthquake, the 6.8, was not necessarily an aftershock, but it was the main quake in that earthquake sequence. And thereafter, there came multiple aftershocks. But going back to the main shock, the 6.8, that happened at 11:49. So just roughly about an hour after the foreshock. So after that 5.9, just about an hour later, comes the magnitude 6.8. It happened within that same general area, and that's the quake that I felt, because I didn't feel the shaking from the first one. I mean, I was moving around at the time and all of that. I just was getting a lot of calls. I was getting a lot of messages, whether I felt the quake and things like that, but I didn't because I was moving around. And by the way, I'm in St. James, so that is on the north coast of Jamaica. And then at 11:49, now I was going to be doing a video later in the day. I was supposed to update a video later in the day, but because of the earthquake, I said, you know what, let me do it a bit earlier than that. It wasn't yet 11:49. I was in the middle of editing that video so that I can post it. And just when I was around halfway through, I started to hear the vibrations, and I'm like, hey, I'm not messing around with this. I know, this is what usually happens before I start to feel the shaking of an earthquake, because I felt a feel. By the way, my first experience was a 2020 quake, and I'll talk about that again, making another reference to it later on. But I knew that the vibrations, at first I thought it was a truck, and one of the reasons I believed that I didn't hear a truck, but my dad, he was outside, and he had some music on out there, so I couldn't hear other vehicles passing, but I made that assumption. But I just felt very uneasy because I knew that an earthquake happened just about near an hour ago. So what I did, I got up, and just as I was going out, making a turn to go to my back door, the place just started shaking aggressively, like not even the 2020 earthquake that I experienced. And that one, trust me, that one was very, very sizable in Montego Bay. And I mean, yeah, that one, it just really had me, like we all felt it. And, it was a very decent jolt. And at the moment, I thought it would be one of two things. By the way, sorry if you're hearing some background noise. It's raining really heavily when I'm recording this. I thought it was one of two things. Either one, the epicenter of this quake is closer to Jamaica, or two, it's within that same general area as the previous quake at 10:50. However, it's stronger. Unfortunately, it was scenario number 2. It was much stronger, 6.8, almost a 7 on the Richter scale. So that earthquake definitely did some damage in Cuba. I saw some videos coming out. Casualties have been reported as well. A lot of landslides, a lot of collapsed buildings. And after that quake, there were over 40 aftershocks, and a few of those have been stronger than magnitude 4.0. So unfortunately, this is what the disaster that Cuba is dealing with. Not just Hurricane Rafael a few days ago, but now an earthquake. And at the time when you would have been seeing this video would have been after, as I said. So I'm pre-recording this before, just to give you guys my experience and to tell you what happened. And as I had mentioned before, the 2020 earthquake, that earthquake that happened on the 10th of November, the dual earthquakes, those quakes took place along that same fault line that resulted in the 2020 Caribbean earthquake, the magnitude 7.7, which struck between Jamaica, Cuba, and the Cayman Islands. So it is along that same fault line, the Septentrional Oriente fault system. So that is where the earthquake took place. And the Caribbean itself is seismically active, and time to time we get these, pretty decent seismic events. So unfortunately, it's not something that we want, especially with these stronger earthquakes, because we know the devastation and there is no warning signs ahead of them. Just as how we can prepare for a hurricane, we can prepare for a tropical storm, we can stock up on food, water, we can get everything done, purchase additional gas, fill up those tanks. But when it comes down to an earthquake, there is absolutely no warning. You just have to act in the moment and take all the necessary precautions and try to stay calm as best as possible. So that is what happened, guys. So now I want to go into the actual weather update for today, so let's move on to that. Okay guys, so we are taking a look at the satellite imagery of the North Atlantic. We can see that frontal system that extends to the vicinity of the Caribbean. There's also a tropical wave in the Caribbean, and that is helping out with an increase in moisture in the east as well. Now, associated with the tail end of that front, we can see that burst of convection within the vicinity of the northeastern Caribbean islands. So let's take a closer look at the area. Here we can see what's going on. So for the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, even earlier in parts of the Leeward Islands, there's likely been some periods of very heavy rain. So I was talking to you guys about that, the potential for the flooding. I mentioned that yesterday in my video that, going through, I showed you guys a rainfall forecast through early this morning. And, we can see that in the very early morning hours leading up to now, there is quite a bit of increase in activity. So it's going to be active within this general area. There's likely to be some additional heavy rainfall as well, especially because of that frontal boundary. So there's a lot of atmospheric instability to really help out with the rainfall. And as that tropical wave is going to drift to the west, that is what is going to help to increase the moisture in the Caribbean, the West Caribbean, and an airflow pressure may form, and thereafter it may try to develop. Models are pretty consistent about seeing development of the system. Even models such as Euro showing even a hurricane eventually forming, but that is not at all solid at this point. We're going to look at the forecasts from the models in a moment. But going on to the rainfall expectations for today, let's move on to that. All right, here we go. So we can see these pretty colorful shadings. The more color we see indicates more rainfall activity expected. So for Hispaniola, for example, especially in the south and in parts of the Dominican Republic, we can see these burgundy and purple shadings starting to pop up, going to 2.5 inches of rain, maybe a bit higher in a few spots. So there will likely be some periods of flooding, even those mudslides possible today for sure. As we head to Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, we already see quite a bit of convection in the area, so there'll likely be more heavier rainfall. Even through parts of the Lesser Antilles today, some additional showers are definitely possible. ABC Islands, there is an increase in moisture around, so you guys have a pretty decent shot at experiencing some rainfall activity today. And even for parts of northern South America, sections of Guyana, Suriname, French Guiana, Venezuela, Colombia, there could be some heavy rainfall at times. But those very high rainfall totals are expected in parts of Costa Rica and Panama, maybe 4 inches plus of rainfall activity today. So there is a significant increase in moisture within this area that will be allowing for a lot of heavy rain. But as we head further north, going to Nicaragua, parts of Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, a few spots in Belize and Mexico, there could be some downpours, but nothing as crazy as what is expected further to the southern territories of Central America. Cayman Islands, a whole lot of rainfall not expected. For Jamaica, there could be some downpours, especially as we head into this afternoon. And eventually, with that tropical wave approaching the area, there is going to be an increase in rainfall. And as for Cuba, there could be some downpours in a few spots today, scattered showers and thunderstorms across parts of the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos Islands. So that is it in terms of the rainfall forecast, guys. And as for the models, let's go ahead and take a look at a few runs. And we're starting out with the Euro. Now, the green shadings you're seeing indicate the moisture, all that precipitation. The black lines are called isobars, which join areas of equal pressure. And in terms of development, what we look for is those isobars being in a circular manner. And the more of them we see being tightly packed, that is a sign of strengthening. So as we're going to be heading into very late Thursday, the 14th of November, there we can see that area of low pressure in the West Caribbean and all that moisture in association with it. As we head to Saturday evening, the 16th of November, we see that there's more isobars. So the system is getting stronger, likely a tropical storm at that point that Euro is anticipating. Now, Euro has it loitering around before it starts moving up towards the Northwest Caribbean. And going to Tuesday, the 19th of November, we can see here that Euro is showing a pressure of 956 millibars. It's definitely expecting a major hurricane from that system to form. So, that's quite interesting to see. Again, as I had mentioned, it's not at all guaranteed, but let's look at some other models. We have the Icon model. Now, Icon is also showing that airflow pressure as we head into Thursday of this week and then go into Sunday, the 17th of November. It shows a tropical storm approaching the Yucatan Peninsula, making its way just along the coast. And there's that frontal system out there that is going to help to influence the track and kind of shield the U.S. from any major impacts. That's one of the big benefits of these frontal systems in the late part of the hurricane season. We don't typically see any strong landfalls at all in the U.S., especially along the Gulf Coast, as we head into the latter part of the season. The GFS model now is definitely showing that airflow pressure on Thursday. It shows a separate airflow pressure forming just to the southwest of Jamaica going to the 21st of November. So that is next week Thursday, not this coming Thursday. Eventually, the model shows a pretty unusual track of the system moving towards the vicinity of the Cayman Islands and then moving south into the South Central Caribbean while strengthening. Quite unusual track here from the GFS. But overall, guys, nothing is solid just yet. But we can see that trend of development being expected. So even though there's some variation in the timing of the system, as well as how strong it will be and where exactly it will go, all of the models are essentially agreeing that there is going to be development of at least maybe a tropical storm, potentially a hurricane. So that is going to be possible. And speaking of that, the National Hurricane Center has also highlighted the area. Now, as of the 1 a.m. update, there's been a 30% formation chance. So we don't see an X because the airflow pressure has not yet formed, but it will form within the coming few days. And eventually that is going to show on the map as well. And the formation chance is likely to gradually increase for the system. So I'll be keeping you guys posted as necessary. And that is what I wanted to share with you in this video. And I do hope you found it to be informative. But if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll get to you when I can. And remember to always be weatherwise.